Brilliant. Hi, Terry. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am fantastic as well. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. And this morning is just filled with magic. And you and I, for the audience, for whoever is watching this, we connected because of the word magic. And we connected on LinkedIn, and somehow we stumbled upon each other's profiles. And I think you were the one who noticed in my About page, in my About Me section, at the time, I had a question: are you ready to create magic? And you were like, oh my God, this is like totally my language. And let's connect, let's talk, let's have a conversation. So I'm super excited to learn a little bit more about what it is that you're up to, what you're creating, what kind of magic you're creating, who you are also for the audience. And yeah, let's start there.
I love it. I love it. I'm a big fan of magic, and I don't remember if you went to my Calendly or I went to yours, but my Calendly link says 20 minutes to magic, right? And it's the idea that if we spend 20 minutes together, we're going to figure out how to abracadabra something up that's going to just change maybe your life, maybe my life, maybe their lives, whatever the case may be. But we don't do that. We won't find out what that is if we don't spend that time, right? And so it's important to get together, to connect, to understand. So,
Absolutely.
who am I? You're hilarious. Let me try and sum this up in as quickly as possible. About 1996, I got into this business networking thing. I was a technology sales guy, and then became a technology recruiter. So I've always been around people, tech, and selling. And to do those things better, I was doing a lot of networking, organized professional networking groups every single week, blah, 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 referrals, tips. And I liked it. And at one point in 2000, I moved back to Michigan. And this is where I live, just outside of Detroit, where all the cars had been made for a bazillion years. Cool area. And they didn't have the right networking group here. So a few years after moving back, I was frustrated. I was on LinkedIn. I was connecting with people all over the world. This is 2004,
Oh
2005
my
time
goodness,
frame.
how did LinkedIn look like back then?
6 degrees of connections. You had literally 6 degrees you could connect with. And I was like member 1,100,000 or something, or 1.5. Yeah, it was,
That's
there
like
weren't.
dinosaur stage of LinkedIn.
It was, yeah. There was all kinds of tar pits, and you had to be very careful where you stepped. And, and who knew if it was going to go anywhere? And the customer service, if you thought the customer service was bad today, you should have, they didn't even have it then. But it was pretty cool. It was neat though. It really was. It was, no one knew what it was. So invitations, right? You had to customize an invitation because it wasn't like, hey, join me on my professional network. It was like, all right, this is some really cool tech that I think you're gonna like because you're gonna be able to connect with. Anyway, it was a trip. It was a trip. Um, and so when in connecting with people all over the world, I realized nobody cared about Detroit. They cared about their area. And I was like, well, why don't I take what I'm doing here, combine it with these face-to-face groups, and make something new, like a hybrid online real world networking group. And that's what I did with Motor City Connect. And that's kind of been that was 15 years of connecting and coaching and training and presenting and keynote speeches and just building the community and helping people get better and grow. And so, and then I wrote a book, and then I wrote a second book after that, because you can't write the second one first, I guess. And that's kind of been the last 15 years in a fairly, I don't know about large nutshell, but in a nutshell. So those are the things I do and why I do them, because I kind of care.
Amazing. So you're creating magic through connecting with people and networking and connecting people to each other, as well as making an impact and somehow bringing interesting topics to the surface and connecting people. on the things and matters that you care about. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what kind of topics do you really care about and feel excited to talk about and network with people on.
So if you want me all in, talk to me about mindset. Talk to me about
Mm.
growth and expansion and abundance. I love talking about law of attraction. I love talking about universal laws. I love talking about spirituality. These things all make my heart, my gut, and my head sing. Right. I talk about alignment, heart, gut, head, those things, having those in alignment is really, really important. You want to get a little weird, we can talk cosmic energy, and I am down with that too. And so those things, and then music, right? Like, because you got to be have something normal that people talk about. So I dig music.
Wonderful, wonderful. I also dig music, especially 80s. It's like Pink Floyd and In Excess and I don't know, Simple Minds and bands like that. It's absolutely amazing. And
I've seen
yeah,
two of those three live. I have not seen Simple Minds, but I've seen Pink
that's
Floyd
awesome. I
and In
have seen
Excess.
Simple Minds live.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
So
with my
between us, we
dad.
got them.
Exactly, exactly. That's awesome.
That's
So, yeah, tell me more about the whole mindset topic and law of attraction and all the magical things that basically we're creating reality from the inside out, right? And I'm curious to hear what have you created in your life applying these principles and how did it shape your life generally speaking? Because I remember when we spoke last time you mentioned that a book landed on your lap when you were in your early 20s which changed your life, and then I'm guessing that from then on things have shifted and you have created amazing things because of all of these teachings of law of attraction, the secret, and so on and so forth. So would be really, really curious to hear what you have created and how your life changed because of that.
so that's I love this question. And so I was gonna answer what you asked before you even asked it, which is cool. In 2001, I had been back here in Michigan for like a year. I was living in Ohio, which is the state just south of here. So 300 miles, not very far away. A 4 hour car ride. So whether we're talking meters or whatever. And so it was really interesting. I was still kind of dating someone and we were driving back and forth, but I knew that had to end. And so one day I sat down and pulled out a pen and paper and wrote down a list of attributes in something I wanted in a companion, right? And there was smart and funny and good sense of humor and attractive and just a bunch of most of it was fairly superfluous. Most of it was shallow. Shallow is a good word. Some of it wasn't, but a lot of it was just like easy surface stuff. And one of the things that I had was less than a size 8 shoe. And I don't know why I put that on there, but it was random and whatever. And so there were 15 or 17 different things on this list. And I read it, I smiled, I crumpled it up, I threw it out. And 2 weeks later, I was hanging out with my one of my college roommates, one of my best friends. We were at the bar. We met some people. Those people came over and hung out, and I was ready to go. I was done. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to go home, and I couldn't find my car key anywhere. Looking all over for it. 2001, couldn't find the dang car key. And so finally resolved to the idea that I was sleeping there, spent the night on the couch. And the next morning, the answering machine went off. Hey, this is so and so. I don't know how this happened, but Terry's car key is in my purse. Call me when you get up and I'll bring it by. So she came over, she brought the car key, and we chatted for a little while, and I was like, "Yeah, that was fun. We should go out sometime." And she's like, "Yeah, totally. Call me." And I was like, "Cool, no problem." And I was like, "All right, I'm cool enough to wait like 3 days to call her." I dial her number, and I get, "Hi, this is Stephanie," and I know that this lady's name wasn't Stephanie, and I was like, crap, I forgot her phone number. I never wrote it down because I'm like, if it's important, I'll remember it. No, you won't. And so I hear this is Stephanie on the voicemail. I'm like, crap, hang up. Half hour later, I get a phone call. Hi, this is Stephanie. Did someone call for me? And I said, well, yes and no. I absolutely called you, but I wasn't calling for you. But I'm so glad you called because I spent 20 minutes thinking, should I call her back and say what a lovely voicemail greeting you have? And I could hear her literally say in her head, whatever, cheese ball. That lady's my wife. And that lady checks every single box on the list that I threw out, including wearing a size 7.5 shoe. So it's swear to God.
Incredible. This is so freaking insane. And you know what's the most magical about this story is that not only that you dropped it completely and you didn't even, like it was just like the seed was dropped and you didn't think about it, but that it came in such completely insane way where you thought that it was this lady, while in fact it was somebody who you by accident called, and then it was like it's just absolutely amazing. So when you had that kind of experience, and probably you have had many of those, how did that then shape the way you even see and perceive reality?
And here's the thing. It's really, really good, and sometimes it's really, really bad. I don't know that I would say I joke about this, but I refer to myself as recklessly optimistic. Right? Like, I just naturally assume that everything's gonna work out in my best interest. And it's funny because sometimes we believe that to be true, even in the face of reality that it's not true. And I don't know, when I'm in flow, it's easy to let things go. When I'm panicky, it squeezed the shit out of everything, right?
Mm,
It's like you gotta squeeze harder, and squeezing harder doesn't work ever, right? Like ever does squeezing harder work. And so that is the challenge, and it's that reminder of, dude, just chill, let it go, it's gonna be fine. Right? And
mm.
figuring out how to be in that chill, it's gonna be fine space.
Totally, totally, totally resonate. And I can resonate also on the fact that I also had a criteria list of a perfect relationship. And I was like, I probably had like 12 bullet points, and they were quite extensive and really describing quite precisely of how that person is looking like, and who they are, and how the relationship dynamic is supposed to be, and all of these things. I didn't have a shoe size, but I had a height. So the funny thing was that it matched 99%, and then that 1% was the appearance. The height wasn't matching. And for that reason, for the first 2 months, I was like, this is not the person. I was completely neglecting it. I was completely like, oh, it's not the right person because it's not 100%. And then bit by bit, I started realizing that it was just actually showing me my own shadow, that I cared about appearance, and I cared about what people will think, and I cared about what my dad will say about my partner, and blah, 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 all that stuff that came from my own conditioning. And when I healed that, simply because I realized that that was a shadow, I was like, oh, but it is 100%. He actually does match everything. So it's so funny how in your case it was an exact 100, and for me it was kind of almost, but there was also a reason why it was almost.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the realization, right, in the eventuality of the awareness that you stepped into it and said, "Wait a second, this isn't anything, right? This is me being silly." And
Exactly.
I think more people need to take time to sit with stuff, and they'd be amazed at how often that exact experience shows up, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you're
And you know what? In the past, it would also be really almost like shameful for me to even admit that, I cared about appearance so much, and that I made a mistake in this way, or now I'm with a person that's, I don't know, like it's 99%, even though now I'm like completely into it, like fully, and the most incredible relationship I've ever been in, and it's a lifelong journey. And yet it's humbling to have been in that experience where I was like presented with the perfect partner who I always wanted, who I always dreamt of. Like it ticks all the freaking boxes, and it's really humbling for me to admit and openly talk about it, that I was full of shit. And basically I was neglecting an amazing human being because I was focusing on the wrong things.
I don't know how much more I could love that statement. Just good for you, right? Good for you. And it's so funny because we spend so much time being full of shit and appearances for other people. It drives me nuts. My wife, who I adore and love, likes to spend money on things that we don't need, for the idea of impressing other people who we never fucking invite to the house, right? So if we have a party, we'll have to go buy a new couch for the deck, even though the party will probably be inside, but someone might look out there. So we'll need a couch just in case. What? What are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense to me because,
Right.
she's still mired in that really concerned what other people think. Whereas, at some point, I think you have to come to the realization that other people's opinion of you is none of your damn business, right? It's
Absolutely not.
just
Yeah,
not.
absolutely. And this reminds me of what you said right before we hit the record button, when you talked about your book and you were talking about the priorities, that we need to identify what's really important to you. What is it that I prioritize? What are my values? What do I stand behind and for? And it's kind of a dance in the dark, or a search in the dark, if you don't really know what you want and what you care about and what's important to you. So I would love you to share a little bit more about the whole book that you have written and released and published, and also how do you think priorities and values and clarity of your vision shapes also one's reality.
Yeah, I love that. Listen, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you get there? Right? You have no clue. And I think a lot of folks, um, maybe not straight up rudderless, right? They without the steering thing on the back of the boat, but they don't use it, right? They're not putting it in a direction. And so there's a lot of introspection, right? I say my favorite kind of inspection is introspection. There's a lot of work, and the answers that we're looking for aren't outside, they're all inside, right? So often we're looking in the wrong spot to begin with. So stop finding gurus, be your own guru. How about that? So the book is an interesting thing. It wasn't intended. I didn't mean to write a book. My daughter went through a bunch of trauma in her first full year at college. She had a boy that she had dated, broken up with, but a boy that she had dated literally jumped off a bridge and has since passed away. He's gone, and that was really sad. That was 2 days after her birthday, um, and a
Wow.
week before finals, so that was brutal. And then the next fall, this was in December that happened. The very next fall, her roommate overdosed on some pills, and
Oh,
she and another roommate were there. Fortunately, saved this girl's life. Got her in the ambulance, did the hair thing. It was, yeah, just whatever. So those two experiences within about 9 months of each other sent our kid into a tailspin, and she was not coping, and nor should she be, right? Those are rough things to go through at 19 years old. And so she had some kind of emotional seizures. And so I did what I thought I could do. I started writing. I was just like here's some things, I would call them mindset matters, things that you need to think about and change your perspective on, because ultimately how we perceive things is how they really are in our world. Even if they're not really that way in our world, but our perception makes them so. And so I was writing and I wrote, a dozen essays or so. And I'd send her one every day, maybe two. And she'd send back, oh, I like this, or I don't like this, or it helped me understand this. And it was an interesting little engaging conversation. And then one day I sent her one that said, find harmony in the fucks you give.
Mm.
And that made me smile, right? Because so often we're like, "Oh, I'm all out of fucks to give. I have 0 fucks." I'm like, "You have plenty. You just wasted them because you're throwing them around all willy-nilly." Right? And so that I sent her a note. I was like, "That would be a funny name for a book, wouldn't it?" And she's like, "Yeah, it would be." And I said, "Do you think it would be a good book based on what you've read so far?" She's like, "There's a bunch of stuff in here I don't know." And so I had set out to write a book for, 15 to 25-year-old people about how to really at about 35, I've noticed women start to come into their own. They start to shed all of the BS, all the expectations, all the conditioning, to use your word from earlier, and they start to find their own power. 35 is when that starts, right? And most men are oblivious to the fact that they think they've always had power, right? They were more powerful at 18 than they'll be at 50, um, present company included. And it's kind of a goofy thing that we kind of forget that we even had any. Um, and so I wanted to like fast track, like, here's where you're gonna get to, but let's get here at 22 as opposed to 42 or 52. And so that was the idea. And then my older brother reminded me that people that age do not read books. It's like, dude, you couldn't get them to read a tweet. You think you're going to get them to read a book? And I was like, that's a fair point. And so, anyway, the book exists. People are reading it. I get a lot of positive feedback. And I turned it into a presentation because I'm a keynote presenter. So now it's a presentation deck, and I got to share it just last week with the Catholic Charities of West Michigan, their Employee Appreciation Day. It was fun. Um, and so it's just a
Awesome.
bunch of lessons about how to really figure out what matters in your life, right? Because everybody's got a different set of values, a different set of beliefs, a different set of things that are going to be their driver. So it's a practical guidebook to point you to figure out how to answer those questions for you. So it brings you clarity, and reduces anxiety and stress and increases happiness and joy, and it seemed like a lot of fun to do, and now it's
I
done.
love that. I love that. And I'm sure that it also doesn't matter whether you're 20 or 30 or 40 or 70. It still does give you exactly what you need at that time. And, like I have met so many people who are in their 70s and they have never done any personal development. And they're like, oh my God, I wasted so many years, but now I'm ready to do the work. Like my grandma is actually a great example. When my mom passed away, so her daughter passed away when my grandma was like 70 plus. And so when she was 70 plus, only then she started doing some personal development and she started reading some magazines on psychology and stuff like that. And I started seeing her basically becoming really wise, not because of the experiences she had only, but also because she actually got curious about all of this. So age is never really a thing at the end of the day. But like you said, the earlier the better. And in my case, it was when I was 28 when I started questioning all of that. And until 28, I was also like stumbling like all over the place and not really knowing what I'm doing with my life, even though at the time I thought I knew what I was doing, and that's probably the mistake that most of us made or are making still, where it's like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know that I want to, go in this direction in life and have this type of career or be with this type of person romantically and so on and so forth. But in fact, only until you start really questioning and becoming aware of, okay, what is actually making me feel excited about life? What is making me feel alive every day? what is making me feel like my life is easy. It's easygoing, it's light, it's peaceful, it's fun, it's exciting. There's always this creativity flowing, and I get to experience the magic of life and the adventure of life. And I think until we start actually kind of diving into all of this and understanding what do we really want, then we just go the typical route, and it's like, oh well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, what others are expecting of me, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's the biggest one. And I'm sure that your daughter took a lot from that book as well, where it's not about what others expect of her, but how she can become the creator of her life.
I love that, and I used to refer to, myself and the people I'd work with as co-creators, right? Because that's the role. You're the co-creator of your life, and it's a really, really big responsibility if you accept it, but I question all the time, like, from a percentage of population, who even knows that, who thinks like that? And I don't imagine that number is very high, right? I believe it's to be under 20%. What would your thought be?
Mm, I would say it's less than 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very little. It's probably even more like 5% at most, I would say. It's like
I
people are focusing on the wrong things. The vast majority of people, or maybe with age, people start realizing like, maybe I'm focusing on the wrong things. Maybe I have been focusing on the wrong things most of my life. Like, let's take my dad as an example. Also, when he was, I don't know, maybe 50 plus, that's when he started realizing, oh, maybe I actually want to enjoy life more and not pay attention to all the nitty-gritty things that are not in my control. And he used to be a complete control freak, a perfectionist, and super much into um, doing things the right way. Things are supposed to be this way. And then bit by bit, above 50, he started waking up from that reality and being like, wait a second, maybe I don't want to be so rigid and stiff. And maybe I want to loosen up a little bit and have a little bit more fun and be quirky a bit more, and just be more authentic at the end of the day. And so I guess the percentage becomes bigger with age. What do you think?
I think that's right. I think we take a period of time to shed the programming and the conditioning. And I think it's all inside of us to realize that what we were taught was inaccurate. But again, I don't know that there's you almost have to reach a point where you're comfortable enough in your own skin to even trust that you could look inside. And I think that takes time, and most people don't get there until much later. And in 50's not that far off, right? I, I
Mm.
I remember when I was first started speaking, I would ask people in the room, how many of you know what you want to do when you grow up, right? And it was like 30% of the room. And I'm like,
and
you're
and, and
50.
like and like super shy, probably like,
Exactly. No enthusiasm.
I kind of know what I want.
Yeah, like there's no way I believe that you believe it, but I like the fact that you said yes. So good for you. I'm happy that you took that step. And so it's interesting, right? I'd love for us to fast track that because there's a part of life that we all miss out on because we're not living it authentically. We're not living it from a truly open, honest, and vulnerable position. We're guarded and we're wearing masks and we're fake and we're missing out on so much real connection that doesn't happen because of the thick wall of bullshit that we build up around
Mm.
ourselves. And you and I hit it off just through words on paper because you can read something that says, I know who I am, right? And that means I'm comfortable enough with me that you're going to be comfortable enough with you in my presence. And that's a powerful gift for people. So, speaking of, thank you for inviting me into your space to have this conversation today.
Yeah, it's a great, great pleasure. And this conversation is just amazing. And also, what you just said about being open, honest, and vulnerable, I think this is absolute key. And that's probably the biggest hurdle, especially for men, to be vulnerable.
Heck
And I
yeah.
would love to hear your thoughts about, because you are that person who has been through experiences in life and you live that way. You live that open, honest, and vulnerable life. And so, what would you say about basically men and how to open up and be okay with who they are and basically give themselves permission to be vulnerable, and that being vulnerable is not a weakness at the end of the day.
It's not. And so I love that because when like the first presenting I used to do was on business networking, how to go get referrals and leads and all that fun stuff. And inside of that talk, I'd always mention that you have to get comfortable asking for help. And then I would say, in men my age and older, we're taught that asking for help was a sign of weakness, right? And you know, rub some dirt on it. You're not hurt. You're gonna be fine. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? Men don't cry. We got fed an enormous amount of crap for most of our lives, and now in the last decade or so, it's changing. Right, and it's probably been changing more than that, you know, I think about the late 2000s, the 2007, 2008 when the term metrosexual came out and all that fun stuff, and guys started dressing a little fancier, and now there's men's facial products all over the place, and the beauty industry is gonna try and soak us for that stuff, and and that's all whatever it is, that's just funny to me. But the reality is this: we're all one thing, right? There's only one race, and that race is human. And this thing, this exterior meat suit that we're wearing, doesn't really do anything in terms of change how we think or change what our drives are or who we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to do, right? We may have a little bit of tendency that's slightly different than someone who's not male, but for the most part, we all want the same damn things, right? We want to be here. We want to do our best. We want to love the people that we're around. We want to feel some strong connection. And we maybe want to figure out why the heck we're here. I don't even know how many people are asking that question. But for the most
Oh,
part, it's no
so
different.
true. So true, so true. And it reminds me of the 85-year long Harvard study, like the longest study ever conducted by Harvard University. And they were studying what makes people happy.
Mm,
So what they did is they chose two groups of people in around Harvard campus, some who were the students, so very intellectual and smart people who were studying there, and then some people who were just blue collar people. And then they were following their lives and even their kids and grandkids and great grandkids and so on. And they were conducting research, qualitative and quantitative, when it comes to not just uh, interacting, having conversations and interviews, but also even measuring their blood pressure and the way their mind was working and stuff like that. And what they found is that what you just said, the connection is number one most important indicator for a happy life. And by far, it was the most important thing. Relationships is the cornerstone of a happy life. And what they were talking about is that it's about closeness and intimacy of those relationships, the longevity of those relationships, and generally speaking, also being a part of something. So you don't have to be married, you don't have to be in a romantic relationship, but as long as you have some kind of community where you feel like you belong, that's what makes your life worth living. That's what makes you a happy person at the end of the day. And that's just so fascinating for me when, you know, it's been the case for decades since like 30s or something like that. And that also was proven over like wars and a lot of adversity in the world. And yet it kept on being the case that it is at the end about relationships.
It makes total sense, right? It really does. And it's always interesting to me to talk to people that are loners or hermits or reclusives, and even they, you can see it, right? You can see the shift in the way they light up when they're engaged in a conversation about things they like. And that's
Mm,
where I think most people blow it, right? I one of the lessons I teach in networking is called After You. And I wanna talk to you about things that you're interested in straight away because of two reasons. One, you're going to be way more engaged in the conversation than if I'm babbling about shit I care about. And then two, I'm going to learn how to relate what I know and what I think into your world. And
mm,
so that makes it so much more powerful because now we're going to be able to find common ground. We're going to find relatability. And it's scientifically proven we like people that we perceive are like us, right? So if
yeah,
I know what you're about and what you like, I can frame almost every conversation into something that's going to fit into your worldview, and you're gonna feel that much better about me that much faster,
totally.
just
And
like
it
a
makes,
relationship
yeah,
hack.
it makes so much sense. And when it comes to being a hermit and and a loner, I can even resonate with it myself because even though on the surface people would say like, oh, she's so bubbly and such an extrovert, but actually a big time introvert. And especially when I started my personal development journey, now it's been 5.5 years since I started that, working with coaches and so on. What happened is that I realized how actually it was helpful for me to kind of build a little bit a few walls and step away from certain friendships and relationships and become very intentional with my time and with my energy, who I'm spending my time with, how I'm spending that time. And so instead of being like, oh, I'm a hermit and that's a bad thing, I was actually embracing it. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, okay, I don't spend much time with other people, but I know that that's exactly where I'm supposed to be in this stage of my life. And at some point, if the time comes and if it feels right, then the right people are going to show up and then it will be at the next level. Like the next caliber people are going to appear in my life. And that made such a huge difference. Instead of being like, oh, poor me, now I'm in a loner, so I will just hang out with random people who don't really resonate with me. And now I already have amazing people in my life who made all the difference. So it's also something to keep in mind that it's also okay to be in a loner if that's the case.
100%. And I think people need to recognize there's a big difference between being lonely and being alone, right?
Exactly.
Well, one of them can be very intentional and feel great and recharging. One of them can be sad and depressing, no doubt. But know where you are and know where what you're actually choosing and accepting and allowing, right? That I love the word you used a few times there, intentionality, right? Be
Yeah.
intentional with what's going on. And if you're not, change it.
Exactly. Exactly. Amazing. Well, I feel like we have covered so many topics today, and I'm curious if there is anything else that you would like to add to wrap this up, because it's been already filled with so many very, very important nuggets.
We agreed on camera that we were just gonna let it go where it goes, right? And then it's gonna do what it does. And I
Yeah.
love that. So I had zero precognition of what we were gonna do or talk about. I was just excited to have the conversation because you seem so cool. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
absolutely. Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for joining and having this amazing conversation that hopefully enlightens some people.
One thing, if anyone wants to look for the book, it can be found at findingharmonybook.com, findingharmonybook.com, and that link actually goes to my website. So there's a mess of other stuff. And I'm sure it would be cool with you connecting with her on LinkedIn, and I know I would be too. I'm Terry Bean.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.